The following podcast contains some strong language and some very average opinions. Any references to actual people are wildly inaccurate. It's probably best if you don't listen at all. The Roaring Peacock Podcast. Welcome back to the Roaring Peacock Podcast. This is the New Year special review, and we will be talking about the previous season in part 1 and the Premier League season in part 2. We're also joined by the magnanimous. Is that the right word? It's probably. I'm trying to make a complimentary word. I'm fishing in my.
Yeah, that'll do. That'll do. I try to be magnanimous every time I lose.
Just fishing in my brain for a big word that sounds good.
Yeah, that'll do. That'll do. Yeah, sounds convincing.
Ross Bell, our man on the post.
Hello.
And Alex, our riot badger.
Good afternoon, everyone.
And my name's Adonis. The year began how it ended, with a trip to West Brom and a West Brom own goal amid a terrible run of form that could be traced back to unexplainable 60th minute collapse against Cardiff on the 14th of December 2019. By the time Forest came around, the Whites had lost 5, drawn 3 in the previous 10 games, with automatic promotion seemingly slipping from our grasp once again. Luke Ayling's post-Forest interview screamed of pain and anger. Bielsa broke with his tradition of not speaking to the players immediately after the game, giving an impassioned speech. It worked. United would only suffer 1 loss in the remaining 15 to be promoted as champions. Off the pitch, the club dipped into the market in January, bringing in Elias Capriel, Ian Poveda Ocampo, and Big Kev. The man we were sold as the next Mbappe turned out to be closer to a 50-year-old Pierre-Michel Lasogga. While a season like no other was suspended due to COVID, it could not have come at a worse time off the back of 5 wins on the bounce. Conspiracies were in bloom in spring. None more so than that the latest EFL ruse to keep Leeds from getting promoted seemed elaborate, to say the least. While we played indoor football with endless toilet rolls and watched Jack Harrison's indoor workout videos, there were fears of PPG settling the season. And when Project Restart did get things moving, we'd spent so much time indoors we'd become cardboard, as 15,000 cardboard cutouts applauded Alioski off the pitch. But the moment that brought grown men to tears was Swansea away, as Pablo slid in an 89th minute winner, all but sealing a return to the Premier League after 16 years. Controversial static bus parade could only slightly take the shine off many fans' first memories of Leeds United lifting a trophy. In a tragic year for many reasons, we lost Norman Hunter, Trevor Cherry, Jack Charlton, Alex Sabella, and Marius Saliukas. In non-Leeds related news, the happiest of years began with Australia burning to the ground. 1 billion animals dead, while Trump played with drones, almost causing World War III. Meanwhile, in Wuhan, a Chinaman ate a pangolin, and a new virus spread across the world, while the British Prime Minister missed 5 Cobra meetings to sort out his divorce. Britain formally left the EU, while the deaths of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd sparked near civil war across the pond and led to Black Lives Matter movement. Far too much more happened in this year, but needless to say, murder hornets, enormous locust swarms, toilet roll riots, the year of the Karen, coffin dance meme, Chadwick Boseman, and too many others lost their lives amid the worst year in living memory. So,
I'm so happy now.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I would suggest that if you lived through the Second World War, you'd maybe argue with worst year in living memory. But for us, certainly, I'm struggling to think of a worse one.
But you see, Nazis, they were a different kind of enemy to this coronavirus stuff. You know,
Gone early with
different
the Nazis
class.
this week.
You mean they were beatable?
Yeah.
They were majority white.
Yeah, there is that, yeah.
Which appeases some Aryan brothers, I presume.
Let's probably not get down that route for the Proud Boys. Let's go. So,
Phil, what's your impressions of the year that was 2020, or at least the first part?
Christ. It's strange, isn't it? Because everybody you speak to talks about what a dismal year it's been. And if I detach myself from the football, then I would pretty much agree. I mean, we haven't been anywhere. We haven't done anything. We've cancelled loads of holidays. This is all really kind of superficial stuff because none of us have been ill. But we had like 2 or 3 months of homeschooling, which was just about bearable, but pretty grim at the same time. But then alongside that, the best year of football I've covered by a mile. And that amazing moment in July, which I thought was going to be... I thought it was going to be ruined by the fact that there were no crowds of note. I thought it was going to be ruined by the fact that everything that would normally go with a promotion season and the moment of promotion or winning the title was pretty much wiped out. But in the end, it felt like a really special moment. I think it was helped by the fact that you did get crowds on Lowfields Road and Ellen Road, whether they should have been there or not. And it felt as if everybody was able to plug into it and to feel it, and everybody was able to live that moment, even though it wasn't as it should have been. So it'll be funny when you look back at 2020. People will tell you that it was a grim year and utterly miserable. But actually, because of the football, I think for a lot of us, it's been one of the best years you can remember in that sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, 2020 was the year that we were champions again, and yeah, if you just remember it from that point of view, it's pretty good, not bad. We've had worse years as a Leeds fans.
Many. Seen many of them. And that's the thing, though, isn't it? You know, it's 16 years building up to that. So when it comes, regardless of what else is going on round about, you do switch off from it all and you do invest in what was a really, really great moment. You mentioned Hernandez at Swansea. I think that's probably the thing that will stick out in my head in 20 years' time, really, was that goal going in, because I think you finally knew at that point that it was going to happen, or it was going to take the mother of all collapses to stop it. And even Leeds didn't seem capable of the mother of all collapses at that point.
You nearly said nailed on there, Phil. You nearly did.
Almost, yes. Over the past 3 years, I've learned my lesson slowly with that one.
Everything seemed to fall into place nicely. We got the wins we needed to, the own goal against Barnsley, and then just that sequence of results with West Brom losing to Huddersfield, and then Brentford bottoming it to make us champions. That was like the perfect week.
It was. It's funny because it felt really on edge right up to the point at which they crossed the line. And given that they crossed the line on basically the last weekend of the season, okay, there's a Charlton game to come. Yeah. It's strange when you consider that and put it next to the table, which shows that in the end they won it at a canter. Yeah. You know, like the gap was huge in the end, and you know, in years to come, people who didn't follow it too closely will probably look at it and say, well, they were clearly the best team in the league, and which they were, and it must have been straightforward. But part of the reason was because the games were congested. So rather than the natural run of Saturday games towards the end of the season, which might have given them a really relaxed fortnight, it was all rammed into a small period of time. But I think, looking back now, with the exception of the wobble down at Cardiff, which I think everybody expected them to be on fire down there because of how hard Bielsa had been pushing them through the lockdown. I think we all expected it to click straight away, and it was a bit flat and it was a bit rusty, and the goals were a bit soft and everything else. From that point on, and particularly the second half against Fulham, where it went from wondering if Fulham were going to nick that game and close the gap to actually pulling away, it was all pretty orderly and it was all pretty straightforward. And, you know, it was tense at Swansea and it was very tight towards the end, and it was horrific against Barnsley. I mean, I think that's probably the one game so far where it was a good thing that the crowd weren't inside the ground, because people would have found that absolutely awful. But with the exception of little moments like that, it really was in hand. You know, it all felt actually pretty calm and pretty much in control. It was just the natural tension and anxiety of the fact that Leeds had blown very good positions in the past, and there was still the potential for it to go wrong right at the last. But, you know, I think from a neutral perspective, you'd probably felt from a fair distance out that Leeds, you know, had that under control.
Yeah, didn't feel like that. At any point did it feel like we had to get in control.
Until Derby, really. That was it, wasn't it?
Even then, I was expecting some sort of points deduction. So, you know, it's always going to happen, isn't it?
Well, that was the dream scenario, though, wasn't it? Not only Huddersfield doing the trick for promotion on the Friday, but then Brentford losing it at Stoke and the title being wrapped up before Derby. So the fact that everybody was hideously hungover didn't matter at that point. Although it was weird, that Derby game, because I saw Liam Cooper on the Monday, and he hadn't played there, but he was saying the amazing thing about it was that the running stats for it were the best of the season, even though it was a dead rubber and everybody had 48 hours and were a bit tired and emotional by that point. They were absolutely bang on it and outplayed Derby. So it kind of summed up the way they've been going for most of the season, with the exception of that little spell over Christmas.
It did feel over that weekend. It did feel like we were just getting home from Ellen Road after drinking numerous cans and then just looking at the TV. It's, something else happened. We're champions now. Back out again. Get me some pyro.
Cooper said, I'm going back to see my wife and kids tonight, and I haven't seen them for 5 or 6 days because of everything that's been going on, and because the games are congested and you had all the COVID restrictions and everything else. But I know exactly what you mean. You did feel by the end of it, like you know that it would have been an endless bender had the pubs been open and nothing been restricted. I think it would have gone on for weeks. So perhaps it's better that it didn't, just for the sake of the city.
Well, I don't know. The economy, there'd have been no need for Eat Out to help out. I mean...
No, it's true. Yeah. Drink out to help out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just one massive Yorkshire hotspot.
I'm wondering about your experience behind the scenes. So when all of this was going on, with Victor and all, do you have any? At some point, did Victor pour some champagne or you know what I mean, like get the guacamole, a handful of guacamole, and smear it all over your head?
The way he goes on in the director's box, you can imagine him throwing it at people. But they did come round on the last day, the last game against Charlton, with bottles of champagne for us, which was very, very nice. But you suddenly realise that point. I mean, you knew it was going to mean a lot to people, because people like Orta and Bielsa, obviously, but the players as well, invest so much in all of this. And I think it's easy to underestimate that, because from the outside, you look at football as a like a fabulous and sort of privileged career, and the whole thing should be very enjoyable, and it obviously can make you very wealthy. But there's a lot riding on it, and there's a lot of pressure involved, and it matters to players to come out the other side of their career with something to show for it. And I think particularly at Leeds, where you've had a lot of people who've gone through the doors, achieved next to nothing, and have ultimately just been part of a story of decline and decay at a club who should be aspiring to so much better. To actually do it and to be the people who've delivered it, I think meant a huge amount. And you could see that in Orta. You could see it in Bielsa in the end as well, which I thought was really telling, because he's emotional in the sense that he gets so involved in the games and it all matters to him, and you can see how serious he is, how deeply he thinks about it all. But he isn't usually emotional in a conventional sense, so touchy-feely. And I don't think any of us were really sure how he would react if and when they were promoted, whether he would leave it to the players and kind of say, look, it's not really anything to do with me, this is down to the squad, or it's there's a bigger picture here, I don't need to be central figure. But I think the club, and I think a lot of us as well, were really pleased that on the Friday night he took himself down from Wetherby to Ellen Road and got involved in it all. And also just to see him at Derby, and then again on the Wednesday night against Charlton with the trophy, you realise that it had properly touched him. And I think I can't speak for him, but I suspect that behind Newell's Old Boys, this'll have been the year of his life in football. I don't think there'll be anything other than what he did at Newell's to compare with it. And I suspect that's part of the reason why this is actually becoming quite a long-term thing by his standards, certainly at club level. We're heading on towards the end of season 3 with him. And more I start to wonder whether the football has engaged him so much that he'll want to, because he is, central to this project, whether he'll want to keep it going for that much longer. But I think he probably epitomised how much it mattered, and how much everybody had put into this. And the fact that when it finally came, it was like this massive release, which even somebody like Bielsa, who tries to be really discreet and tries to be as kind of understated as possible, even he couldn't help himself.
Yeah, my wife got so sick of me showing her the 30-second clips of this old man, essentially. She was
people crowded outside his house.
Exactly. Why are you showing me this old man shaking hands and giving sweets to kids? But yeah, even she's a Chelsea fan, so she's living the life of luxury. But like, she could understand how much it meant, and it must mean so much to him. I didn't shed a tear at any of it until he lifted that trophy, and he just kind of slink off into the background, because he didn't want it to be about him, did he? But this wouldn't have happened without him at all.
I'm wondering what it meant to you, Phil, as you're a Hearts fan, right?
Yeah.
But you've been around the block a few times. I asked Brian and we asked Adam Pope, when was it that you started supporting Leeds?
It's a kind of natural development, and you don't have a crossover point. And I'd never call myself a fan. It would be a bit twee to say that, because you grow up supporting one club, don't you? And you know who mine is, but you get a natural soft spot for them. And I think more than anything, there are a lot of clubs who don't achieve too much, and a lot of clubs with fan bases who stick with it regardless. But I think at Leeds there was always that assumption, not just locally, but amongst people who didn't follow the club or had no time for the club particularly, that they were kind of down and festering at a level that was just ridiculous if you had a setup at Leeds that was productive. If you had ownership who could do what was possible to be done here, if you had the right head coach, and if you had players who under the right head coach were performing as they were. And I over the years, I used to watch the crowds going, particularly away from home, and think to myself, I wonder what it is that keeps people going with this, because there were long stretches where there was nothing to cling to, and there was no promise. I mean, even in the season before Bielsa, the way it petered out under Heckingbottom, you felt like you were back on the roundabout, and it was just, this carousel that keeps going round and round, and every time it stops, you're back in 15th place. You were saying there, I think the phrase you used was living life of luxury with Chelsea. I think it depends on you. What you see as luxury depends on your perspective. I mean, I don't think if I was a Leeds fan, I'd particularly want to trade what Abramovich has been doing at Chelsea for what you've experienced under Bielsa for two and a half years, because it's been totally unique, and it's been such an exceptional project which has worked. A lot's gone into it. Everything's been gambled on Bielsa, and it's paid off, and it's paid off with one of the best teams that you've seen in the Championship. It's paid off with a team who somehow have gone into the Premier League and are mixing it as they are with a lot of players who've never played in that division before. And you've got him who just seems totally at home and settled at Thorpe Arch and Elland Road, and he lives in Wetherby. He doesn't spend a lot of time in the centre of Leeds, but seems at home in the environment, and with the fan base here, he seems to understand them. They 100% understand him. And I just think that there's been a lot of talk this season about some of the criticism he's had and everything else, and a definite feeling in some quarters that he's overrated, or he's a bit of a myth, or that he's not as good as people say he is. But I think if you've been close up to it, really close, and you've seen what's gone on over the past 2 years, and then again this little 3-4 month period in the Premier League, you do appreciate how special it is, and you do appreciate that you've seen something that you're probably not going to see again in this exact form. This is a hard club to get a grip of, as proven by the length of time that they were out of the Premier League. And I mean, he pretty much did it overnight.
Yeah, we spoke on my Man on the Post podcast the day that Uwe Rosler was sacked and Steve Evans was appointed, and that for me is I absolutely hated football, and especially Leeds at that point. Like, I could not stand it. And Bielsa, not alone, but with Radrizzani and Orta, has absolutely rekindled my love for the club more than the sport. I actually love this club now. The rest of the football I could care less about, but those three guys have done something incredible.
If you think about it, though, you've got the foundations of it with Radrizzani and Orta and Angus, and then you've got Bielsa who comes in and turns, like Phil said, a squad that is finishing 15 in the Championship to essentially 15th in the Premier League with only a few additions, and that's mainly out of coaching. But I think it works quite well because Orta is a massive football geek, and he kind of hero worships Bielsa, so he understands exactly what he needs. And I don't think Bielsa's had that at a club or a country before. So he's got a hierarchy above him that understands what he needs and gives him what he wants, and that's what's giving the longevity. So I think
Chile was pretty close to that for him, certainly for a while, and Newell's as well. But I mean, you're right about Orta. If you go into his office at Elland Road, he's got a coffee table that's covered in football magazines. He's been collecting them for years, and he's got some from either Spain or Argentina where he's never missed a copy. He's got the full set of editions right from the start. But also the setup, I think, it changes it kind of alleviates some of the pressure that you normally have at a football club, because you don't sense that Bielsa is putting huge pressure on when it comes to transfers, and he doesn't obsess with them in the way that I think some other managers do. And because of that, there isn't the strain on. There is pressure on Arthur to deliver, but I don't think there's the constant strain of, I need to get this player, I'm going to be asked to get that player. We don't really have the money for this, but this is who he wants. How are we going to do it? How are we going to fund it? But the byproduct of that as well is that I don't think, even though they obviously invested £100 million in the summer, they didn't spend £100 million there or then, but that ultimately would be the commitment if everything, your clauses and add-ons and everything else were paid. It's not, you're hearing the narrative at the moment about Chelsea and Lampard, and it's all coming down to the fact that he's spent a lot of money over the summer, and the question is, against that money, is he going to be able to deliver the performances in the league position to keep Abramovich happy? It doesn't feel like that at Leeds. You don't sense that they're saying, look, you spent £100 million, so you need to do X this season. Because actually, that was only 4 players who came in, one of whom, Llorente, has hardly played. And it is still essentially the squad that he came up with. So it's kind of different dynamic. And I think everybody thinks about it in a different and slightly calmer way. And it feels like a not a free hit this season. It was never going to be like that. But you don't feel the same tension around individual games and results as you did in the Championship, where every win was crucial, every defeat was crucial, every poor run of form made you ask the question, is automatic promotion going? Is it going to be the playoffs? It was that constant sleepless anxiety of is this going to work out? Whereas actually, you come into the Premier League and you're able to enjoy it, and it's quite a weird sensation.
I think that's been a bit of an adjustment for Leeds fans, is that we don't need to finish top 2. I think when we've started losing a couple of games, it's like, oh no, we need to do something and panic, so like the knee-jerk reaction stuff. It's like, actually, anything above the bottom 3 is fine.
Yep.
Let's just accept that, please.
Yeah.
So I think as well, because people think that they'll finish comfortably above the bottom 3, you're left with a kind of ambiguous target, aren't you? If they finish 10th, great. If they finish 13th, not really any different. It doesn't particularly matter. Even if they finish 15th, but they're well clear of the bottom 3, then it's a steady and good season. It's all a bit more open.
Yeah.
So there was so we're still on part 1 here. So there was a stage where everything was shut down, wasn't it? And we were thinking that the season might be concluded on a mathematical formula. And then there was Project Restart, and now you feel you're having to go through checkpoints, and I presume you're getting something shoved up your nose, or not the Chileno kind, but
we don't do COVID tests, but we get heat gunned at every game. So they'll shoot you in the forehead and make sure that your temperature is okay, and you fill in forms where they trust you not to lie about whether you've been in contact with anybody or whether you've got any symptoms or anything else. So it's strict, but you're not massively restricted at the grounds compared to what you would normally do. You can't really use the press lounges as you would have done before, and all the press conferences are done over Zoom, but you're still able to sit in the press boxes, and you're still able to to kind of crack on as you would have done before. But it is really odd being, it's starting to grate being in empty stadiums now. To begin with, you're just happy that the football's going on. But I think when Romain Sawyer scored that own goal at West Brom last night, there was this weird moment where nobody could quite believe that he'd done it and that the ball was in the net. And you kind of knew what the atmosphere would have been like if the place had been full. It would have been really funny, but as it was, there's just this weird moment where everybody went back to halfway and then cracked on again. And it's, there does come a point at which you remember that minus crowds, that it's less of an event than it was before. And I think everybody knew that from the start. It's just that the longer it goes on, the more tiresome it gets.
I mean, before we move on, can we just cover the fact that without that break, we'd never been promoted? Just want to just make sure that we're talking about the right thing. But without that break, we couldn't have got up.
I'm sure we'll get onto that.
Let's come on to that a little bit later down the line.
It's one of those weird things, isn't it? It's, when he scores the own goal, I'm just laughing. I've got this belly laugh, like it's it's something real. It's coming straight from my heart, heartfelt. And there are very few moments in football like that, and you can only imagine what the crowds would have been like with the witty chants and so on. So there's definitely something missing, isn't there, Phil?
How, just out of interest, how engaged would you say you're feeling in the games at the moment? I'm sure you're enjoying them because Leeds in the main are playing well, but given that you can't ever go and you're never there in the flesh and you're not drinking beforehand or afterwards and you're not in your usual seats with the people you used to having around you, like how engaged do you actually feel in this season?
It's about 3 or 4 times removed almost. I was saying to these guys, like, you plan your Saturday out on a match day. You know what time you're setting off from your house. You know what you're going to be wearing. You know, do I need a scarf? Is it with that type of weather? You go through that ritual of, well, I've got the same ritual. I'll go to the co-op at the top of Beeston Hill, get a Costa, drink that on the way down, you know, meet everybody in the Foster's zone, and then we'll have a chat and go in. I've got my ritual of going in the turnstile, going up the right set of stairs. I'm not a superstitious person, honestly. But then that's all removed because, one, there's really weird kickoff times. Like waiting until 5 o'clock in the afternoon to watch a game is strange because what do you do with yourself? You're trying to find an ounce of Leeds news in the cycle of things that are going on. It's just the same rumours. Or somebody on Wacko said that Bamford stubbed his toe. He might not be in. And that just absolutely just spirals into paranoia. Yeah. And it just feels like you're watching like a simulation of a season and you're not feeling that whole thing of being there surrounded by the community that you're always used to. It just feels a bit removed. It's great. You know, we're doing fantastic. And I do worry that if when fans get back, that Leeds will have a downturn in form. Because is it removing us that's been great? Has it been the COVID break? I don't know how conflicted I'd be with that. I'll stay away if it means we win. It's fine.
Let's round up this part 1 then, and let's just get everybody's kind of final thoughts on the end of that Centenary promotion season. Maybe start with Ross.
It was bloody fantastic. I'm looking at the table now. We won 5 games in a row. That's all the table shows me. No other team won more than 3 in a row in those last 5 games. So suddenly we were falling apart. We did all right, didn't we? 10 points, 10 plus 10 goal difference over West Brom as well. And yeah, we just look a class above now as well. The top 2 teams in that division last year played each other last night, and one of them won 5-0. Pretty good.
Alex?
Yeah, we're the champions. Fantastic. This virus will be gone by the time we kick off at Premier League. So we're all back in stadium. Fantastic. Can't wait.
That's the spirit. Yeah.
Bill?
It was just finished off in the way that you want the title winning side to finish it off. But the football, it wasn't incidental, but the magic came round about it. You know, with the exception of like Hernandez's goal down at Swansea, it was that buzz on the Friday night when Huddersfield scored, and suddenly you realise this is actually it. And then, you know, I've never ever covered the game as relaxed as Derby away, because everything was wrapped up. And normally in seasons where you have dead rubbers, the dead rubbers because the season's been a waste of time, or it's fallen short of the end, and that inevitably means that you're talking about which players need to go. Is the head coach sticking around? You know, it's all the kind of negative stuff that comes up. But it was just what everybody was. They weren't on Sunderland just because he played really well, but it was that kind of atmosphere. And then, like I say, even the night when they lifted the trophy, no fans in the ground, but there were loads outside. And I thought, you know, the second season of the Amazon documentary, it was fairly short. It was fairly superficial for obvious reasons, and I didn't think sort of journalistically it was an amazing content. But I did think the last few minutes, you know, that point at which Bielsa's talking, and the cameras flying over the crowd outside Ellen Road was absolutely magical. It was, and it just captured, I think, what that night really meant.
Okay, fantastic. So that's the end of part 1. Most of our stats come from LUFC Stats or LUFC Data on Twitter. You should probably give them a follow, as they're more interesting than us. A very special thanks to Adam Warner, Barney Stewart, Cookie Ewan and Howard Metcalf, Josh Pearson, Laura, Leon and Rob, The Light Show, and all our family and friends. So many